just want to go through and just show you some of the different projects that I've been doing. Some of the things I've created from scratch myself, some I've taken from templates and just sort of tweaked and monitored and modified, sorry, and just use them with my kids and get them going with it all the time. I used to be a tech teacher, use it in tech class, and I'm a current fourth grade teacher, and I use it as much as I possibly can, especially now in this virtual world that we're in. So this is one of my first assignments that I've been doing. I used to do this as a collaborative project in tech with the classroom teachers. We would do an animation using either like the plant life cycle, the life cycle of a chicken. Kindergarten would do the plant life cycle. So we taught the students how to use the symmetry tool to draw a flower, draw a background, and like slowly duplicate their slides from the seed all the way through, duplicating slide, making small changes, like drawing a root, then drawing the stem, drawing the leaves, finally getting to that point where they actually use the symmetry tool to create their flower. Some of our advanced kindergartners got to the point where we actually had them bring in a butterfly, and we showed them how to take their picture. They put their face on the butterfly. We taught them how to group it, and then they were the butterfly flying to the flower. So lots of ways to just really engage the students and get them moving forward with it. Other things, you can use it for digital storytelling. It ties greatly into that, using the video, adding music, recording their voices, telling their stories, things like that. This is one that sort of just popped in my mind in the middle of class this year with my fourth graders. We were talking about renewable resources, and we were talking about solar energy. And our last lesson just happened to be about a group of people who created solar ovens, and we're taking them overseas and using them to help people in other countries have place and way to cook their food. And my class brainstormed lots of ways that we could come up with materials in our own house that we could use to create a solar oven. So I gave my students, our mascot is the cheetah, so I gave them what's called the Cheetah Challenge. And I said, well, come up with your own solar oven based on all of the different things that we came up with, all the different materials. And this is one of my students. She went in, she decided to decorate the background, and she went all out with her background. She labeled it so it would be something like I would see in her science journal. So this was really, really awesome. And it was an optional activity. And it's one way that I like to see what the kids can do when I give them activities like this. We also were doing circuits in science again this year, and I wanted to have a way for the students to represent, since we couldn't do it in the classroom where I would give them that hands-on to be able to create the circuit. So I created this template, and in the directions at the side, I gave them, use these stickers. They're all cloned. They would drag them up. They would use the drawing tool to draw the wires to make the connections for an open circuit first, then duplicate the page, delete the open switch, add in the closed switch to show me a closed circuit. And hopefully at the end, when they realize it's a closed circuit, they use the lit light bulb instead of the dark light bulb. So I unfortunately came up with this idea after the fact, so I can't wait to use it next time with my kids. I think it's a great way to show that they understand what we've been doing, especially since they couldn't do this in the classroom. Normally we give them the wires, we give them the batteries, but they couldn't do it this year. I wish I had thought of this sooner. We're doing 3 regions of Maryland now. So this is our social studies. I took this straight from our social studies unit. I made the map a sticker, glued it down, and gave the kids the empty key. I modeled for them again. My team wasn't wanting to do a lot of this, so I always made these cheetah challenges for my students. And I had a number of students start it, but only one finished it. So I do have a sample to show you. But the goal was, color code the regions. Then they could actually go in and use the information from our social studies journal and represent different things that would be in each of the region. And the goal was to have at least 2 things for each region of Maryland. And This was one of my students. She went all out. She's one of my higher students. So she went and shows there's farms and mountains and beaches. And I like how she even went into the fact that she color coded the background. So I knew which region they were going to, where I would find those as well. So, you know, that's that. I didn't give that direction. They chose to do it that way, which really shows the engagement that they have when they were doing this. This is the template. I know, Heidi, you've seen this before. We use this with tech in 4th grade to introduce coding. So this was my sample. I brought it in, I projected it on my screen, and the students would use my code to decode this message here in the middle. And I would give them a time limit when they first came in, and they had to try to decode the message. And we made it a nice, fun game. And the message says technology is fun. And it led into one of their social or science units where they had to actually create their own code. The original way was they had to try to transmit it across the room. We thought it would be more fun to use Wixie to do this with them. The kids had a lot of fun creating their own code. And initially we had them do their own. Then they shared their project with the team members, so they used the Teams option. And then the team member had to try to decode their message. So they worked together decoding their messages. And then eventually we tied this into actually writing codes and sending it across the room using a robot. So they had to program a robot to go to a certain place, decode the message, and then follow the directions to program the robot to go to a certain spot in the room, which was a lot of fun. We used that with the Dash robots this year, so it was really cool, and the kids had a blast with that. Actually, it was last year, not this past year, but the kids had a blast doing it. I got to go down to watch my kids work in the tech classroom doing it, so it was really cool watching them do it. This is how I get my little guys, kindergarten, 1st grade, introduced to coding. I based this on a code.org lesson where I create a very basic grid. We teach the students how they can clone, bring Mr. Bear over here. They can bring the honey over here. And again, all of the symbols are coded. So I would work with a partner. I would put my bear and my honey on the grid, and then I would have a partner go to my computer, I would go to their computer, and then they would go, oh, well, how am I going to get to the honey? And they can drag step 1, I'm going to go here. So they would have to create the code, and then when they finished creating the code, I would go back to my computer and follow the code that my partner gave me, and I could see if they coded correctly. So this was our introduction to using coding, and these buttons go with our B-bots. So we would use this as a lead into our B-bots. And I had a B-bot activity sort of like this, where we created several different slides in Wixie where the students each had a different job. We had our Wixie person, which they would read or use the recorded feature, because we would record our voices to give the directions. They would read the directions or listen to the directions. One person is the robot wrangler. They would get the B-bot if it went off anywhere, and one person was the programmer. And based on what the clue is, they would program the B-bot to get to the correct place. And then they would drag, once they get to the correct place, they would drag the correct symbol into that, and then they would change pages. And we would do this with the whole group, and then they would rotate jobs. All the students had a job to do it. They were programming, they were coding, and they were using Wixie all at the same time. This is one that I'm using with one of my students this year who's very shy reading out loud in the virtual world. So for me to get good samples of him reading, what I was doing is taking clips or screenshots of what we're reading in class, gluing it down, and then going into a breakout room in Canvas or in Google with him, and then just showing him, reminding him how to use the record feature, and then he could go off on his own at home, record at his own time, listen to it if he was comfortable with it, not delete it. And then when he was done, he'd just send me an email, Mr. Floyd, I'm finished with my reading, and then I get a chance to hear how he's reading. I've also introduced this concept to our ESOL teachers so that they can use that to get authentic reading practice from their students and just sort of monitor progress from beginning, middle, and end of the year. Can everybody see my screen okay? I saw Scott's message just now.
It's small.
Am I still good?
There we go.
Should I stop?
You should be good. You should be good.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so this is one really good way to see progress of the students as well. So as a teacher, I can keep these for my students and see how they're doing, how they're progressing with their fluency throughout the year. I thought this was a really nice way to use it with them, and for them to see that it can be used in lots of different ways as well. This is probably one of the most fun activities that I did. It incorporated art. The art teacher came to me one day and was like, I really want to do a stop motion project with the students in the art class where they're actually designing and developing their characters in my classroom, their backgrounds and everything. And her and I brainstormed some ideas, and I came up with the idea that we would give them templates in Wixie. And unfortunately, I don't have access to any of those students because this was a 5th grade project, so I can't go back and grab their work. But we created a storyboard for them, or allowed them to decide how they wanted to do it. They could, they had to use teams, and they could then decide what their characters were going to look like. So they would use the stickers and the backgrounds in Wixie to create their storyboard for their stop motion. So they would go through, they didn't necessarily have to do all the text and everything start to finish, but they did a good beginning, middle, end at least, and somewhere in between, just to get a good idea of what their project would look like. Then I would print them off for them to take them to the art room, and they worked in the art room to create their pictures or their actual stop motion videos from that. And I actually have a sample of one that we created a Google Drive when the students turned them in. So I still had that. So let me go ahead and I'll just show that real quick. So that was a sample of what they did. We used an iPad app for them to do the stop motion, and it was a lot of fun. The kids really, really enjoyed doing this project. The 5th graders, you know, this was something we did at the end of the year to sort of really keep their engagement down, and it was a lot of fun doing that with the art teacher. So they saw a graphic design sort of piece too, and that designing and coming up with their story for their stop motions. This was another one. I tend to use Wixie heavy with my lower grades. The cool part is this is one of my current 4th graders. This was done when she was in kindergarten. And towards the end of the year, when they were more efficient at using Wixie, they had practiced some of their math skills. We did a Wixie math story. So what they would do is they had to come up with their own number sentence. They had to get it approved, and then they had to show their work here. So this student actually chose to use the base 10 blocks. And I believe I may have even, when I did this, actually locked that that folder in. Yes, I do definitely have templates for most of these projects without any issue. I could definitely share those. Maybe at the end, if you want, we can swap email addresses and I can share them with you. But I like to lock down those sticker folders for them, so it's easy, especially for the lower grades, specifying the folder so they literally go right into the images. They have access to the exact ones. They're not trying to search and hunt. It makes it so much easier for the lower guys. So this, and normally this would be a 3-page project. I imported each of the pages. So step 1, they needed to come up with their number sentence. Step 2, they had to come up with a story for their sentence, for their number sentence. So in this one, there were 12 butterflies. And some of the kids that finished early, I would get them to actually narrate their story as well. So there were 12 butterflies, and then 8 more butterflies joined, and now there were 20 butterflies. So that would be sort of the process of going through the number story with the students in kindergarten. Again, this was a fun one. It could be challenging for some, but a lot of them really enjoyed doing this. And the fun part was this time, for this piece here, they could go anywhere. They could find whatever stickers they wanted. It was their story. They just sort of had to use things that were similar or like, and it was a lot of fun with them. This was a first grade one. This is one of the Wixie templates that we did, but we tweaked it in how we did this. Normally we could just do, all right, raise your hand if you want to do this or whatever. We did an initial our favorite fruits, and we did do the tally marks and things like that, just sort of as modeling. Then later what we did is the students got the template, but they didn't get the fruit. They got to choose what they wanted. So some chose like ice cream flavors, or some chose fruit, so some chose animals, and they would put their stickers at the bottom, and then we had them rotate through. So they had a tally mark sheet on at their computers, and then they would rotate through. So everybody rotated through. When they got to it, they would mark off their vote, which one was their favorite. At the end, the students had to calculate all of their data and then create their graph for it. So it was the whole process of not just only choosing their data, what they were going to collect information on, but then everybody participated in the data collection, and then they had to actually calculate their data. So it was a fun one. A lot of getting the kids moving in the tech classroom, moving around from computer to computer, so they weren't just sitting still. And again, it was one of those, like, we could do it with a timer. All right, you have 30 seconds, go, boom, and they just kept switching, and it was a lot of fun with the kids. I made this one this year for my 4th grade students. We jumped right into place value this year, and after being out for so long, trying to review the different forms of numbers, we would allow the students to go in and actually create their own number. So they could go in and just add a text box or use the stickers, create their own number, and then literally in each of the boxes just type the different forms. And it was a great way to reinforce the things that we were talking about in class, as well as give them just extra practice from being out of school and out of practice for so long. And now I got that idea from, I saw the templates that were in the Wixie templates, but I wanted to add a little bit more to it. This is the cover page that turned out to be a nice anchor chart that we used for our class this year when we started doing partial sums. So I took this, and everything's glued down here, but I cloned the numbers. So the numbers are all cloned. The students would be able to type in and create their number in expanded form. So they would type the numbers in expanded form. Everything would be lined up, so they could drag each text box to make sure everything was lined up, get their partial sums down here, and then use the clone numbers to actually show their work and then solve the problem. And this is a sample of that. So this is sort of a very similar problem that they would do here. They would just literally click, type the number, and then, then they would just 2,000. And I always encourage them to space it. Oops, I keep wanting to hit my shift key tonight. So this was the way that I had my students working on partial sums. Again, it was an optional activity, but most of my students did it. They found it to be a fun activity, and they really enjoyed it. Matter of fact, the last page when I had created this, I forgot to glue my grid down, and I got lots of emails from my students telling me the numbers were going behind. So it was a nice learning experience for me. I forgot to do that and check, but it was great for the kids to see that, you know what, adults make mistakes at times. So that is some of the ways that I use Wixie. Definitely would open up to any questions. If anybody had any questions for me or comments or anything. I can definitely show one of the kindergarten animations that I have. This was one right here. See if it will load. There we go. And this was fun too. The kids loved playing around with the music once they got to make their video. And one year we did with this, we actually had the students label each of the parts of the plant, so we could extend it even more for the students to really engage them and challenge them. And this was a total of like 30 slides. I don't have anything for ants, but that would be really cool. And there she's using the thank you. I forgot the symmetry just left my. So that was that one. That was a really fun one. I do have some other ones, and Scott or Lindy, maybe you could help me. Every time I go, I end up back on rounding when I searched that a few weeks ago. This is another one that we did with second grade. This one was so awesome. We gave this, it had to do with creative writing, and descriptive writing. We had the students draw their own alien, and then on a new slide, we had them type a description, a very detailed description of their alien. Then what we did is we matched, each student was given a number, and I can't remember because it's been a little while since I did this. We gave this description to another student. That student then had to create a drawing based on this description, and then we compared them at the end. So we would see how close they had. And unfortunately, I don't have access to the other students' work to see how close they got, but it was a really cool activity that we did with the students. They had a lot of fun with that one. And the fun part is these are all kids that are now in my 4th grade class again, so I was able to pull their stuff out from their Wixie files. Let's see, I was dumping stuff into this folder. I think that was pretty much all of the activities that I had. I've done an extreme weather book with my students that tied in paraphrasing, citing sources and things like that. That was a 3rd grade activity that we did as well. So, all right, well, I think that's about all I have. So I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Great.